gavel. Okay, I'd like to resume the meeting. We called the meeting to order at 6:30, went into executive session to discuss an employee appeal. And we had scheduled a public hearing for the veterans tax exemption 7 to 7:30, so we're going to push that back 10 minutes because it's now 7:10. So at this point, we'd like to open up for public comments.
They want me to make the just presentation piece, then we have the public comments.
Okay, we'll walk through the presentation. I think that'll give you a context of where we're at, and then open up the public comments and Q&A. Additional time will be provided as needed.
So thank you very much, Mr. President. Some of this information we shared at the board meeting before, so some of it's just a review in terms of what the law is about. The alternative veteran exemption, it's an exemption that basically has different categories of benefits based upon the qualifying conditions of the veteran, so to speak. And there are also differentiated levels of benefits from A through N in terms of the dollar exemption amount for the different levels as well. The impact on Shen, for the last time on board, we mentioned that this exemption doesn't necessarily change the amount of taxes that the district collects. It shifts who pays the taxes from eligible veterans to non-eligible veterans. So that's a piece of that we spoke about as well. Currently, there are exemptions in the town of Half Moon, the town of Waterford, and the town of Stillwater, and those places adopted what they call the basic level, level A. The town of Clifton Park, Boston, Malta, and Saratoga County adopted level K. So again, it's a range from A through N. By the numbers I just gave, for example, for the board's purposes, not necessarily as a recommendation, we have about 22,000 tax parcels within the school district. About 2,200 of those are potentially eligible parcels for this exemption. And I just gave some examples of potential impact at a level K. The second piece I just wanted to mention, I won't go through this fully because I want to use the time more so for public comments, but at the request of the board, we completed a survey of residents for a period of about 30 days, just to get some sense. The survey wasn't to decide on it. The survey was just to get some sense of where people's thoughts were on the survey. We had 702 people responded. Of those 702 people, give you some sense of 693 people were residents and 9 were non-residents. Interesting that non-residents respond to our survey. 188 of those people could be potentially eligible for this exemption. 49 of them were not eligible for this exemption, and 24 people weren't sure if they were not, probably some military, but not sure if they were qualifying for this piece or not. But this gives you just, again, for the board purposes, some sense of people's thoughts on the exemption, and we have already reviewed this matter with the Board of Education as well. The exemption, so the second piece I want to share with the board real quick is this is a question and answer document that's available by the district on the district website after the last presentation from the board. Is also available on tonight's board agenda as well, on the Q&A under the public hearing. And it answers a lot of questions such as what is the alternative veteran exemption, who is eligible, what are the benefits to be an eligible veteran, and so it kind of goes through the litany of it. The piece I just want to highlight here, these are the various exemption level, what the state called a basic max, which is an interesting combination of words, basic and max, within the same sentence, with a level A, to this what they call the level N, and you see that there are 3 different categories: wartime, combat zone, and disability. Those are 3 different categories that people could be potentially eligible for those respective pieces. The piece why we're having this conversation now is that in order for this to be eligible for the tax rolls of September 2017, it needs to be adopted prior to March 1, so people who are potentially eligible can file for eligibility and subsequently be eligible for that exemption for school property taxes come September 1. It's not a star exemption, just to clarify that piece of it, because it's always something that people say the school district doesn't get reimbursed for any revenues that shift from one person to the next person. Mr. Delano, if you don't mind, can I save your question to the public piece, if you don't get to that piece? So the last piece I just want to answer here is that the process for deciding on this is that the board now we having this public hearing where members of the public come, ask questions, offer comments, so on and so forth. The board could ask questions, offer comments. Then it's up to the board to deliberate either tonight or some other point to pass a resolution. If this is action that the board wants to partake, the board has to pass a resolution, and the first resolution must be first on the basic exemption. And if the board desired to do more than the basic exemption, the board would have to either do one of two things: have another public hearing tonight, if, for instance, if this transpires tonight, or have another public hearing at some other point, and then pass a resolution on whatever that modification might be. So it's a two-step process. If you want to do the first thing and do nothing else, it's one hearing, one resolution. If you want to do an enhancement to it, it's another hearing, another resolution, because the public in both instances deserve the right to express their thoughts, concerns, issues, questions, otherwise. So I'll stop there and back to Mr. Preston's comment, open it to the floor.
I just had one question on clarification, because it wasn't absolutely clear to me. When you talked about those levels of, and there was like 12, 8, and 40?
Right.
Yeah, under A. Is that additive? In other words, the basic would be 12, and the next one would add another 8, and then the last
So
one would add 40?
it's interesting because it's not a straight line formula at all. It's a combination of what's the person's eligibility status. It's a combination of the value of their property in relation to the exemption. So in other words, someone couldn't get a credit as a result of the exemption.
Yeah.
So they go through the calculation of the property value, tax impact, eligibility piece of it. And we don't do the calculation, by the way, as a school district, and then come up with what's that exemption amount. However, someone wouldn't get a credit for the exemption. So you have someone who may have a star exemption or senior citizen exemption already, and could have this, but they'll never go below 0 in that sequence.
Right. But it would be like...
It could be, and that's why I say could be. And that's the piece that there's a potential, Gary, that could be, that's the case.
I don't think you're understanding his question. Go back up there to the top.
No, I didn't realize
I
it. Go away.
think what Gary's asking, or I'm not understanding your question, is where the chart is out.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to that.
So Gary's question is it additive? Can you be a wartime combat zone with a disability and get a 60,000?
No, so no, you're going to fall into one of those.
No.
No. So the question is, you're going to fall into one that provides you the single maximum benefit.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So for instance, if you could be a wartime veteran with a disability, you fall into the disability category.
A combat zone would actually qualify you for less than just a wartime
Well, it
investment?
depends on how. I didn't make the rules. I didn't make the rules, and I didn't make the definitions of those things. So
Okay.
I'm only.
That's why I had the question.
So can we open to the public?
I might be able to answer that for you, and that is, today in the military, someone can be sent to a combat zone, they get combat pay, but they're not really exposed to fire. Someone can be in Kuwait at an airport getting combat pay, but they're not really exposed, and they wouldn't receive that type of recognition. So they are putting a tier in there for someone who the system recognizes more than just you were close, but not actually there under fire.
So can we do the question if there are public comments?
Certainly. We'll turn over to what,
If
public
there are public
comments?
comments.
But it would still be...
Questions or otherwise?
Just wartime.
Are there questions from the public? This is a public hearing.
Who decides, Dr. Oliver, what, how you qualify for that? If you were, say, I was like in the Korean War, but it was like a conflict and they never signed the peace treaty, I mean, how did that all,
So
not that you would decide, who does that for you?
So the process is a combination of, it's a combination of Saratoga County, Office of Real, I forgot what it's called, Real Property, the State Veterans Affairs, they also have an eligibility list. And so it's a combination of different places. So you get for this case local, you apply to, start with your local town assessor, say, okay, what's the process for that? And there's a submission of names and lists to the Veterans Affairs. I'm thinking that's the assumption. So there's a whole bureaucracy that we don't even engage in. But the first point of contact would be your local town assessor, because that would be the first point of contact, and I'm assuming at that point the necessary forms will be in place. This is, quite frankly, this is one of those that we try to ask questions, and it's one of those, well, if you guys don't have it, we're not ready to to go through the process with you yet. But one of the things, if or when this is approved, it turns into a different conversation now in terms of us getting information to share out to potential eligible veterans. So short answer to your piece yet, we have to go through this process, and then we get this process. The piece that we know, and we've heard from the Town of Clifton Park assessor, is that in order for someone to be, this has to be approved prior to March 1 in order for them to start the process of applying for the exemption for March 1. Once this exemption is approved by the board, this exemption is on the book beyond forever and ever. So it's not like a one-year thing that we just do it and it's only good for a year. The resolution will be for effective March 1, 2017 and beyond. So it's one of those processes continues on. Other question, Mr. Atwell. I was expecting a question from you.
No question, just a comment.
You want to come forward, if you don't mind, or you want to comment from there?
My name is Alan Atwell. I live at 9 Greenlee Drive. I was in the Battle of the Bulge at 19 years of age. I was in the War of the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, and the French Legion of Honor. I'm not sure what category I'm going to fall into, but 75 years ago, these walls could have been covered with Hitler's picture, and we could be sprechen Sie Deutsch tonight. And I would urge the board to pass this resolution. I have an interesting cane. I'd just like to read the caption. A veteran, whether active duty, retired, National Guard, or Reserve, man or woman, is someone who at one point in life wrote a blank check made payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including my life.
Yes, sir.
Can I speak?
Yeah, you want to come here? Absolutely, come up forward.
Sure.
If you don't mind. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. My name is Larry Friedman. I live at 26A Leonardo Drive, Clifton Park, New York. And the one thing I wanted to say, I'm a Vietnam combat veteran. I would qualify to the top limit on that scale, unfortunately. But what I wanted to say, I don't think you realize how much the war played on our futures. Because I had graduated college, accepted the law school, I had my family business all set to go, and they pulled me into Vietnam. I came back 2 years later to a daughter I hadn't seen for 13 months. My dad sold the business out from under me, and if you remember Vietnam veterans, we were scorned. I mean, we couldn't wear our uniforms home because people threw stuff at us, called us baby killers and everything. Totally out of our control. We just served our country. But I came back to no career. I mean, the only place that would hire me was Gola Corporation, Price Chopper, and I was sweeping the floors in the produce department. I'd see people I would know and I'd hide because it was somewhat embarrassing to be that low on the scale and have a college degree. As things turned out, I got into electronics with the company and everything went well there. But you got to remember, I lost a good 3 years there. And all my friends during the time I was serving, whether you agree with the war or not, were building their careers. So economically, I've never recovered. I've had, if you look at the years I served, and then the years I started to get my career going, I'm behind the 8 ball. Another thing that amazes me is a statistic, I don't know if it's totally accurate, but never have so few done so much for so many. Come on, there's only 1% of the population that serves in the military. And if you don't think you owe them a debt of gratitude, you have something else to think about. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So can I share one other thing, Mr. President?
Am I clear that we have no involvement in the definition of how these individuals be categorized? I'm
That's correct.
thinking,
That's right.
I have a brother who was a medical officer, retired from the Army as a colonel. He served in Vietnam at the hospital at Da Nang. By definition, he was not in combat, but try to tell him about that when he's spending his nights in a trench after a mortar attack, or having a round go by his head while he's within the within the base. So to me, yes, he did not pick up a rifle, and he did not confront the enemy, but he was certainly exposed to every bit as, well, not quite as much danger as somebody who's out on the line or patrolling in the jungle, but nonetheless, he was exposed to danger to a degree. So I would have a dog in the fight, you might say, as to how these people would be defined.
So if you're in Virginia, you'll be arrested for dogfighting. Just a joke. But on a very serious note, I understand, and I think that's where this process is somewhat awkward for schools, because it's a process, it's a law that was passed that we're executing or passing a resolution, but we don't administer the process. And so one of the things that right now there's the website for New York State Taxation and Finance website has the entire process back to the question that was asked, what people need to do to go through that process. But I'm keenly aware that the local assessor here in the town of Clifton Park, at least one of our 6 municipalities, is aware of the process because we've had some communication with that individual as well. So one of the things I just wanted to kind of close my part of this is, and this note that is put in here, and I mentioned before that the adoption of March 1 is a time frame, and the adoption of the board prior to March 1 provides whatever time frame to be eligible for 2017. Adoption beyond March 1 just creates the timeline for the next year. So again, it's not one of those things, if you don't do it by March 1 of 2017, it doesn't happen at all forever. It's just a matter of when that timeline kicks in, the effective year of taxation or tax impact. So I just wanted to close on that comment for the purpose of the board. If there are questions from the board, I will certainly try to address those questions. If there are questions from the audience, I'll try to address those questions as well.
So the question would be, if our next meeting is 28th February, if we waited until then, this really doesn't start till, we really skip a year. So
You're going to, because essentially a person will have equivalent of 2 days,
yeah.
which is pretty unlikely to turn around the process to be eligible for March 1.
All right.
That's correct.
Okay, and so what we've done on the schedule is, it wasn't, and I can speak to this because we're not, we haven't adopted the agenda, but I want to bring to everybody's attention, this is going to be on section 7E, but the comments next to it are pending public hearing. And so as a collective group, as a board, we really should comment or build consensus if we wish to move forward with action 7E.
Or when you get to that point, if there's a motion in a second, then we go forward
Okay.
with it.
I think probably better to wait for a motion in a second. Or does anybody want to make any other comments now or question, anything for clarification?
I think we've only got 2 choices tonight. I mean, the choice is to vote on the basic max tonight, even though the charts have sometimes shown,
Yeah,
well,
just
okay,
K for exemption.
that's off the,
Yeah.
that can't happen. We can't have a second public hearing and go through this and have it meaningful. So it's either to approve the basic max, an exemption, or not, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And the question really is, and we really don't have a choice beyond tonight.
For it to be effective for
To be
2017.
practical For this year.
That's correct.
Right, so one of the choices could be, if the choice is not to do it, it's let's wait for another year and do it, delay it a year, okay? That's one of the options if you're not, or if you could say, not, I just don't want to do this. Okay, any thoughts on what Mr. Casey has brought forward?
I just clarification, I thought I understood Dr. Robinson saying that if we were to pass the initial one, that we could actually have a second public hearing tonight?
Well,
To
you
consider
potentially
the-
can, but I would say we couldn't because we didn't announce a second public hearing.
Yeah, right,
So that would be,
okay.
yeah.
I think there is another option, not for 2017, but we could sort of wait and see how the dust settles with the state budget, put it right back on an action item for this board in March, April, May, and have it take effect for 18, could we not?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what Mr.
So we don't necessarily have to leave it until next March if we just.
No,
decide
no, no,
not
no,
to
no.
do it.
Anything after March 1 goes into effective 2018. Anything between now and March 1 gives however long that window is, or short that window is for application process for March 1, 2017, and then it's on the books forever and forevermore.
Is it included anywhere in the budget this year? Did you see it in the state budget?
So far, there's only been a couple legislators tossing around. The governor did not put it out there as a part of his state budget. There's a lot of things he didn't put in a part of the state budget. And so there's still a couple people tossing around trying to pass it through the process, and I don't know how feasible that is or isn't. And so I'm not in a position to even intelligently comment on it. Any other questions from me? Any questions from the public?
Or do you want us to talk about it later? I mean,
No, I've got a comment from my perspective. My intentions are to abstain because I would be eligible for this, and I don't want to, ever vote for a tax break for me. And I think that's one of the things we have to realize with this law is that it creates a lot of confusion relative to how it's managed and a lot of inconsistencies within the state. Okay, I think there's been a lot of discussion about what might be available within the state. It hasn't really gotten into the governor's budget, but there's talk about a V-STARS type program where the state decides, like the current STAR program, which is not related to veterans, and that allows it to be taken out of the inconsistency between the 700 different school boards in the country. And so generally what you read in the papers, the closer you are to New York City, the school boards closer that are, quote, downstate, have a high percentage of backing this. The closer you go to upstate, there are less and less school boards. And some school boards in the capital region have voted not to do this. So it becomes extremely inconsistent depending on what your zip code is, and you can end up with an A through a K or through another letter. And that makes it just a very, what I would call inconsistent law. There is a better means. It's maybe percolating through the legislature, does not look like it's on the governor's budget. So I think that's one thing I felt was a major concern with this that people have brought to my attention. And for me personally, I just cannot vote on a tax break for me. And so I would have preferred it to have come from the state legislature where they can vote on this and have been treated like a V-STARS program. The other thing I think is that there are some questions on what happens if there is a veteran that has earned this, and let's say they commit a felony. Concern would be, okay, you've got someone who's committed a crime after serving his country, but he's done something that's recognized in the community as inappropriate. Then you might perhaps have the victim of the crime paying for that, paying that, covering the gap in their tax credit. We'd prefer to have something like a V-STARS program that actually can track if that person has committed a felony or done something that perhaps they would not be eligible for it at the state level. So there are a lot of inconsistencies and fairness issues in here. The other thing I think that really needs to be emphasized as a veteran eligible for this, when we first had Mr. Atwell speak, I think you came here and spoke in September. You brought another person with you, and that person mentioned this program, and the way he characterized it is that you simply vote on it, and then you don't ever see it again. And that bothered me as a veteran because one of the things that's very important, not just for the schools, but also for how this country unites to fight a war and demonstrates a national will to fight a war, which is probably the most important thing, you have to stay connected. And what has happened over time, and I think Mr. Friedman pointed out, we've gone through various cycles where we go through pro-veteran and then anti-veteran. You happen to be in the time when it was anti-veteran. What I learned from November 11th or November 10th, we had at Scano, talking to a member of the district. She explained that when her mother was teaching at one of the schools in the capital region, okay, they had a similar veterans ceremony, and this was in the 1970s, and all the students walked out. So you came through a time where, post-Vietnam, definitely the trough, and then through the 80s it really built up, and there's a high level of support, okay? The point that I like to make is that in our lives, especially in veterans, it's very important you stay connected with the schools. It's very important that we bring guest speakers in at the appropriate time. Veterans Day, Memorial Day, September 11th. and interact with the students. Explain to them that this is probably the decision you may make, but clearly someone you know as a friend is going to be making whether they go into the military. And one of the things I felt from this, I would rather we focus on a personal connection with veterans to our students. That's much more important than a financial credit back. We owe it to you guys so we don't have these cycles up and down. Because we don't want to have what happened to Mr. Friedman. But I've studied this. I was a career military officer, and we've always felt that somewhere along the line, the next generation, you'll see a significant fade. It'll drop off. And due to some things that happen in terms of national security or decisions made, where the public has lost its will, gotten very frustrated with the war, they take it out on these guys. And they clearly took it out on him. So that's where I think this sits. One of the points in terms of process and voting here is that if I'm abstaining and Mrs. Rajat, due to getting sick, is not here, we now have five members voting. And is a pass getting a majority, or do we need
There'll be enough for quorum.
So it's 4 votes we'll get? What if it's?
I mean, actually, it's actually 6 votes. Your vote is abstaining is a vote.
Okay. Okay. So I think we have to look at this. There's a lot of things that have come out through this, but I respect anybody's vote either way. I think this is a board that expresses that this is how members vote their conscience. Some members have pointed out that this creates inequity, okay? Some members have pointed out that it's not a perfect law. So either way, I think this is something that people should move to consensus towards voting. And that's sort of where I sit on it. At this point, is there any other comments people would like to make?
See, I'm on the opposite side, Bob, in a way. I'm a veteran, and, on Veterans Day, I stand up, I'm a veteran, but I was a reservist, and I don't qualify for this. But I listened to Mr. Friedman, and he did something that I didn't have to do.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Vietnam, he went into combat. I went to the reserves. At the time, the war was unpopular. It was a way to meet, and it was a draft, and it was a way to meet your military obligation. I think this is messy, and I'm not sure waiting for Albany to straighten up the mess is going to happen the next year or the year after. Maybe the year after when it's an election year. I feel bad that this is, we're looking at it now, and we really got, if we approve a resolution to do the basic max, then people have to, get their act together and get their applications in by the 1st of March. I think it's a tough date. Certainly, if people want it, they can meet it. And I would say to you, and this is a conscience thing, Bob, but you don't have to apply.
Okay.
It's an application process. If people decide not to apply for it, then they're not covered by it. So I can support doing the basic max, because I think we did a survey. If you looked at the numbers, the number of people who served or who thought they would be eligible versus those who weren't, more people who weren't eligible supported this, just number-wise, than those who were eligible. So that's, it's a survey we did. Was it scientific? No, we put it on the website. We waited for people to respond. But I think there is service that we can certainly look at here and thank people for that. But I think down the road, I wouldn't jump on where we go to the next level. That's for another board. That's for another year to see what else transpires. But I would say we brought it this far. I would vote to carry it over the line and do it.
So from a protocol perspective, when we get to that portion on the agenda, we ask if there's a motion and a second, and we go from that piece of it. So from a clarification, is it fair then, can we say that the public hearing is closed at this point, Mr. Presley?
I believe so. Hold on, Mr. Friedman.
I just wanted to make one comment. He actually did a very good job of it. As a military officer, I would have thought, just like you said, you don't have to take the money. And if you take the money, give it to a charity. But think of your brother soldiers. Don't abstain on your brothers. That's a very, very short-sighted. And I'm not saying, I'm glad you're ethical. I'm sure you're not. But I think you're being more unethical. Turn your back on your brothers.
So at this point, you want to call the public hearing?
At this point, we're going to end the public hearing. Any other, since there are no more comments? Okay.
Where? Say that again? You're
Come up in a
po-
minute. That'll be great.
No, student comment on this topic? Oh, no. Now, we'll call you up in a second. I know you're anxious to come up and tell us about all the good things you're doing. You want to close and convene that?
Okay, I'll convene the public hearing. Okay. At this point, we will shift to opening up our public session. We're now at 7:41, so I think we did a great job covering the public hearing in 30 minutes. And let's all stand. Before we do the Pledge of Allegiance, I would like to recognize two teachers who are no longer with us. This past week, we lost Erica Ledoux, a co-teacher from Coda, who covered ELA and Coda, and we also lost Derek Dayton, a high school English and alt ed teacher. Let's pause for a moment of silence, please. And now let's go to our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
As far as announcements, as I mentioned, Mrs. Rajat is ill this evening. Also want to remind everybody, executive session, we held that to discuss an employee appeal. Anything else, any comments? Okay, let's move to adopt an agenda. Motion, Mr. Casey, second, Mrs. Stevenson. Any comments? All in favor? Okay. And now let's move to item 2, Board of Education comments and reports. Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to mention tonight that in the Shenendehowa Education Foundation, I will be talking about this and to my fellow board members as the months go on. We have just put the save the date out for our one-time night this is our sole fundraiser for the Shenendehowa Education Foundation, and it's the green and white ceremony. It is on June 10th. This year it will start at 6:30. It will be at the Hilton Garden Inn, and we will be working with district, the different groups, administration, athletics, PTAs, to get a core group and sponsoring and making it a great night. So again, this is the one sole night to really help the foundation. That does help the district, the robotics teams, backpack. There are different teachers come, administrators come, and we help. So please consider getting involved this year. Thank you.
Pass. Mike.
Few items I wanted to talk about. Tri-M had an open mic night, and the most creative fundraiser that has ever been conducted at Shenendehowa. They had a mattress sale. I don't know how it went, but they had open mic and a mattress sale. So, got to give them credit for being creative. When there are events at Shen, people show up. Community conversations. There was a great turnout for community conversations. Coffee talk on SAT prep. Again, a great turnout. Orchestra concerts. Not only audience members, but the size of the orchestra is incredible. One I went to in particular was in middle school, but the participation by our students is just amazing. And also my annual favorite, the Dolphin Reader PJ party at Scano. I also went to the Color Guard show, and it's always spectacular, but I wanted to draw attention to the JV Color Guard team. And, you know, these routines are very dependent on audio. And they started their routine and audio failed. And they immediately started counting. And they kept going to the point that they had to be told it was okay to stop. And I just thought, what resilience. This is their annual home show. You know, everything should be going right for them. It didn't, and they didn't stop for an instant until they were told, it's okay, you can stop, we'll reset the music. And I just wanted to give them so much credit for their perseverance and their sort of professionalism and determination to continue on with their routines. I was thrilled to see the field hockey teams get their rings, their state championship rings. We have also a lot of Shen Reflections participants advancing to the state level. So I'm curious and hopeful to hear more about how they did. I wanted to be sure you all knew there was a great article about Chrissy Hefner in the Community News and the work that she does in the athletic department. And, you know, she's not the kind of person to kind of be out in front like that, but it was a nice recognition for her. And we have a Friends of Education Award winner, which I think is just amazing, and I'm grateful for that. And the last thing I would say is that we are unfortunately all too frequently in the position of having to bring comfort to our students because of a loss. And I was just amazed at Erica Ledoux's services that students bring comfort to the adults. The message of encouragement that they provided to her colleagues, and her families. Our students are really incredible, and I really wanted to acknowledge that, and I'm sure in the days to come, probably the same thing is going to happen at the high school with Derek as well. So, thank you.
Mr. DeLallo?
Yes, today, our Senate, U.S. Senate, decided that they would split their vote with the endorsement, over the endorsement of the U.S. Secretary of Education. It was, in fact, 50-50, and the Vice President, in such instances as the President of the Senate, cast the deciding vote, and he cast his vote in favor of the administration's nominee. Of course, he is an integral part of that administration. Personally, I find that a very unfortunate situation because I don't think that I've ever seen an individual who was less qualified for a position that they were nominated for, nor as hostile to the basic function of the institution that they're nominally the head of, which is public education in the United States. There seems to be, I think unquestionably there was, a factor that had to do with the lady's resources, financial resources. She put a lot of money into candidates' election coffers, and I think the vote somewhat reflects those donations. So I'm not sure that our government was well served or that the people were well served, but it is what it is.
I'm going to reserve my comments for the veterans discussion.
I have a separate set of comments that I'd like to focus on transparency to the community and integrity to the community, and I've got just a written statement I'll walk through. I'd like to reaffirm what our district provided at our last meeting 2 weeks ago regarding the petition that has led to our upcoming referendum. It's important to point out that the defined threshold of 10% qualified district voters was never really completely defined. Yet our colleagues demonstrated and diligently validated these signatures to a high level of confidence. This allowed us, now the district, to demonstrate this criteria had been met. A key point here is that our team had no preceding similar event. I don't think anybody had ever walked through that number of signatures. We're talking 7,000, and had to sort it out with a large group. And yet, with that high number of signatures, they figured out what they needed to do, and they got it done. The best thing about that decision, I don't think anybody left here disenfranchised. If we think about it, if we had far less signatures in the threshold, we would have felt confident that the petition effort failed. If our quantification of signatures fell within the targeted range that we thought was there, we probably would have not made an immediate decision, but would agree to review the data further. Regardless of which path was taken, okay, everyone involved would have left the meeting confident that this was done fairly, accurately, and responsive to the community. This had to be done we felt within 2 weeks an answer needed to come back. This is an example of how our district's leaders and employees quickly are understanding what is needed. They use common sense, teamwork, hard work. They use technology as appropriate to basically ensure we have transparency to critical decisions that needed fairness and needed not to have bias. Similarly, throughout, that concerns the petition and where we're going with the referendum. But throughout this RFP process, we've applied the same level of due diligence to ensure we proceed in a way that maintains our community's confidence, meets legal requirements, and retains the specific confidences on unique issues that typically cannot be discussed publicly. So over the last several weeks, we've received numerous complaints, challenges to how transparent we are in terms of governance relative to this land RFP. In only one minor case, okay, that being our procedures of where and how we start our executive session, are we making any changes or revisions to our practices. As you can see at the start of this meeting, we are now calling it to order from the front of the room. In the past, we did it in the back, and we did that probably for several decades. And then we vote in the front of the room, and then we move to executive session and then resume the meeting. So that is a change. We're acknowledging that. And we're acknowledging that in the spirit of continuous improvement. We'll gladly make revisions like this because that is sort of a technical thing that made sense and was probably communicated well. But this is a technicality. It does not imply that anything else should be inferred other than in terms of this lacking of transparency. For the other number of claims asserting that we aren't transparent, we have simply responded with an explanation that clarifies our practices and why we keep them. And as far as we can tell, no further complaints come back from those people. So this indicates that, a lot of the concerns brought forward have been resolved, have been addressed, and we'd like to continue to move forward here. To support our community, to meet legal requirements, and to operate efficiently, we use executive session so that we can privately discuss, deliberately ask questions, share perspectives within our board. And these usually involve topics like collective bargaining, confidential personnel issues, and sale of real property. If you go to policy 1550, these topics are listed. Very important that we understand why we do this. We have to balance that board members are individuals elected by the community. They need to listen in private. They need to understand what's going on. They need to ask questions in such a way that they can fully understand and feel comfortable with where that discussion is going. They want to share their insight. They want to often hash out in an executive session what's going on. Similar to what we do in public session, it's not an easy, sometimes it's a contentious, sometimes it's clarification. But the key difference is that in executive session, we don't vote. We vote, come back in public to vote. And that's where we ensure that we have transparency on what happened. We're going to continue to do that, as I mentioned. Although a recent newspaper article asserted questions surrounding our board meeting practices, I can assure you that our executive sessions have met legal and contractual requirements as communicated in our policy, and to balance the need to retain transparency to the community. In the spirit of transparency and fairness, I request that members of the community not make false conclusions from articles or social media that simply pile rumors around this recent change we made. We made the change, we've communicated it, but other things out there, we've responded and answered the questions, and we're simply moving forward as is. Moving forward to this referendum, we intend to apply similar due diligence to a transparent process by honoring each voter's right to learn the facts and make their own decisions. We're not in the business of getting voters to a yes. We're in the business of providing accurate facts to our community. In that spirit, I also want to thank you for your continued due diligence as a community and for your continued support. So thank you very much. At this point, we've done with Board of Education comments. We now turn it over to public comments, and now first with our students.
Joe can't be here today because he's sick, but I do have some updates on the dodgeball tournament. So far, we have 2 teams, but the deadline's not till around the 14th, so we still have some time, and you know how high schoolers are, they'll all come in at like the last minute. And the dodgeball committee is working really hard, and they're always in the library handing out like flyers and like announcing it, so the student body knows a lot more about the dodgeball tournament this year than they did last year, which is why last year the event wasn't as successful as we hoped it would be. So this year, because of their hard work, we're hoping it's going to be a good event. And the date is St. Patrick's Day for the event. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, we'd like to open it up to residents for public comments. And we have one. Okay. Mr. Berlin, please come up. And I'll read. This is an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. If so, please complete the comment form. The board will not address specific comments, but ask for your name and address in the event follow-up is necessary. We remind residents that the public comment portion of our meeting is only one item on a long agenda. We therefore ask each speaker to be as succinct as possible. Remarks be limited to 2 to 3 minutes. We'd also expect that residents speak in a respectful and courteous manner so as to model proper civility and decorum for our students. Residents may contact the board via email at boe@shenendehowa.org. All questions coming to the Office of Public Information and coming to the Office of the Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and the superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions, concerns, typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions, concerns, typically addressed by the superintendent and or designee. So go ahead, sir.
My name's Frank Berlin, 980 Main Street, Jonesville, and I spoke before about the 34 acres. I'm happy that we're going to have a vote on April the 4th, so it's going to go yes or no. If it's yes, it's done. If it's no, I hope we have a restart, because I do feel there's been so much confusion, the fact that it was put into this RFP, and then the board said they couldn't discuss it anymore. So that may be your point of view, but the public feels like we never had a chance to talk about this land. Since it was our land, it was surplus land, that were some other options that we could have. And when we came the first time after the person withdrew their bid, we're hoping that maybe we could talk to you about another option. So that was a problem. And maybe you didn't want it to happen, I'm not saying, but that was the interpretation of the public. So they get kind of uptight about that. So we have 3 board members that voted not to sell it, and we have 7,000 people that were eager to sign this without, I wouldn't give them a speech. So while you people were counting the votes inside, 160 of us were standing outside in the snow. Some mornings it was 7 degrees, keeping the pen in your pocket. So it was a tough job on our side too, all right? And I hope that if this goes so the land doesn't get sold, that we get together and talk about what the community would like to do about this, land that's excess. And the idea that it's going to go, half of it goes to the town, I don't know how interested they're going to be in putting a park in where there is some wetlands, where there are mosquitoes in the summer and stuff. So we have other things going on, and that is a bit of a problem too. I just want to let you know that there's a lot of things going on. When you say you're interested in children, some of you said that, and that's why I'm here. Well, you know who goes to parks? Children goes to parks. We have swings there. We have all types of facilities. Any park you go to, a town supports the park for the general public to use. So hopefully we can work something out. We can restart the process, because the only thing that people feel they have now is their vote. But you need to hear other people's opinions, not just mine. I'm telling you, if you get to talk about this, I'm out of it. I got other open space projects I'm working on in the western part of town, so I think there's other people that are interested in doing something with the land rather than have it developed. So thank you very much for your time. And one other thing, my grandkids were in the orchestra and the band, and it's excellent. Right, Dr. Robinson? We've been there. Those kids are fantastic. So thank you very much, and I want you all to support the school board, all right? Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay. At this time, I think we'll turn over to the superintendent's report.
So I'll be very brief, and I came with a little token. So as a school district, we have different awards, different recognition that we give people at different times. And something that, if you've noticed that I've been wearing this particular pin, and other board members have been getting jealous, other administrators have been getting jealous. Where did you get that from? And if you weren't getting jealous, you should be jealous, because it's such a handsome looking pin. And the reason why we haven't shared it yet, because we didn't get the other version. So tonight, I would like to give each board member one of these pins, and on this pin is a replica. I get back to you, kid. Actually, no. Mrs. Rajatni, you can have that one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Each board member, one of these pins, and on this pin is a replica. I get back to you, kid. Actually, no. Mrs. Rajatni, you can have that one. Thank you. Thank you. So on this pin is a replica of the bell tower. People say clock tower, but it's actually not a clock tower. It's a bell tower that has a good number of the bells from the one-room schoolhouses that's located by the high school. So that's what's on this pin, and then the Shenendehowa Central Schools. So we see this as something that will provide to individuals for different occasions. As we move forward, it's a nice symbol of what the school district, school community is about, and I thought it was most appropriate that I first present a version to you as a Board of Education. So those are my comments tonight. I'm looking forward to the various presentations we have from our students as well as administrative colleagues.
So first on the list is we have Future Cities presentation from some of our students, and Mrs. Betzweiser.
We're very friendly, don't be nervous. My name is Diane Betzweiser. I've worked with Future Cities since 2001. I really appreciate Mr. Slawinski, who is a CODA teacher, and Mr. Clark, who is a Gowanna science teacher, in working with the students from September on, and we just had our competition. We all got trophies, and it was very nice. There is 5 parts to the presentation. We have to, first of all, get together and make a plan, and then we have to write up our plan, and then we have to do a SimCity presentation, PowerPoint, and then we have to have an essay. And then our final thing is to make a city. This year, our idea was open space and public spaces, and how can we use them to the best of our ability. And I thought it was very interesting with the 34 acres at the same time. They were talking about open space and what you can do with it. So we were real interested in that. So whatever happens, we've got a lot of ideas. So thank you. Mr. Slawinski, CODA.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not used to microphones in the classroom. CODA's city this year, I'm very proud. I have half my team here. We have Rianne and Nithya, who worked very hard over the last few months. They picked an awesome spot for a city, Hawaii, on the beach. And unlike a regular city, they decided to take Hawaii, extend it outwards with a little bit of inspiration from Dubai, and actually to have the city extend outward into the ocean and under the ocean, so that a very large amount of the city is underwater, and it's like living and working in an aquarium. They rolled with that. They did it on their own. I sat back and gave minimal advice. So the idea is, as far as public space, and I'll let the ladies tell you in just a moment, just picture a city. I'll help get the poster board out with some pictures of some ideas, but try to picture a city where not only are you in the beautiful tropics, not only are you at the beach, but you're also living, working, and even shopping, which that was their idea, shopping underwater with the beautiful fish and corals around you. Okay, ladies?
So we have a revolving bridge.
Can you slide it down a little bit?
You gotta move the city and get closer to the mic. That's 2 things.
We have a poster under there.
Got it? There we go. Oops. Okay, got it. Got it. Okay.
So first of all, we have a revolving bridge, and it's used to connect to several places, like the apartment complex, a park, and a beach, and the Hilo Octopus Mall, which is both above and underwater. It's like a shopping center.
And the Octopus Mall is like a small Disney World, and then it's probably submerged in water, and it's like one of the main tourist spots in our city. And we also like our transportation. So we wanted our city to be more non-polluted. So like we only used like transportations like cable cars, because cable cars are transportations that even disabled people can use easily. and it also like drastically reduces pollution.
Yeah, these tubes that you see here, they are for subways, and some of the subways go underwater into the Helioxodus mall. And over there on the end is a volcano, which is used to collect geothermal energy.
Yeah, geothermal is the main source of energy. And we also use solar power. We use PV cells. PV cells are attached to the peak of the mountain, which it basically attracts insolation and it powers. It's like the backup source of electricity for our city, but geothermal is the main one. And
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Do you have a, it strikes me when I look at these, I'm just looking at it tonight, that these are, the materials you use are very common materials.
yeah,
Yeah.
Do you have a budget limit that what you can do with this? Is that a goal to
yeah.
do things
It's a
like every day?
$100 budget on the model.
We have a
$100
set budget, and then
Yeah, and
we
we,
have to
we
donate.
also wanted to use recycled materials. Like that was one of our main goals.
Like
too.
this, for example, is a fishbowl.
Also, they get coins if they use recycled material. More coins, more recycling they get.
We try to do it with as little money as possible.
But we always get what was your award this year?
It was
Best bridge.
best bridge because this bridge moved.
Yeah, and it's an invention by Leonardo da Vinci. I think you know that you guys know. Like he was the inventor. He invented like many inventions for wars and stuff. And then the rolling bridge was one of his ideas, but then we used it because it helped our city. It helped mainly for the transportation and.
Any other questions?
Well done.
When do we go to Hawaii?
For that too.
Road trip to visit.
Okay, Katie, why don't you come up? Okay, half of you over there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, stop right now. You keep going. You stay. Okay, this is the Acadia City, and who wants to start? Max, why don't you start?
Okay, so in making our city, we wanted to incorporate public spaces in every aspect of life. So our main public space was our dome, actually, which had like a park on the top. It also had many other public spaces inside of it, like it had a museum and stuff for people to learn about the culture of not only Brazil and Rio, where our city was located, but also other countries around the world.
Preeti, why don't you do? Preeti was one of our presenters. We have 3 presenters.
We have a special train. This is our main mode of transportation around our city called the TEB, which allows us to easily get from one place to another. Let's see. And like it moves like that. But it allows for cars to move underneath it while still going, so it's main transit. A lot of people use that.
Danae, get closer to the mic. You're not loud.
So we also have a tanker, which is a ship that holds freight. So the industrial area right there, the tanker can send freight to other cities and countries.
Rohan?
Yeah, so I was going to talk about, so the power in our city mostly comes from, for example, our solar panels, which are all facing north, because we use in the southern hemisphere to get more light. We also have a windmill here, which is our moving part.
Can you hit her?
Yeah, so this is a moving part, which is a very special windmill. And that provides all the energy and power for our city, renewable energy sources.
Anybody?
So, we wanted to make our city really people-friendly. So you'll notice we have a lot of green spaces. We even turned the space with the windmill into a green space. And right here is our residential area, and you'll notice we have a bridge connecting from the residential area to the school, so that people don't even have to cross the road to get to school.
And since our city is so people-friendly and, well, it's real, tourism is a huge industry in our city. We have boardwalks and beaches where tourists will love to spend their time, and futuristic attractions and public spaces like the Dome, which will attract tons of tourists.
Also, one of our main goals was to preserve culture because this is Rio. So
we have a bunch of open air markets around here that have local restaurants and shops.
Our dome is really friendly to everyone that lives in Rio because all of our residents and tourists can shop in there, and it's very people friendly.
Yeah, the dome is kind of like a multitasking space where it has like a library, like a cafe, and people can just enjoy themselves in that area.
I told all the students they had to answer one question. What would they do different or give advice if they're 8th graders? And how many here? Raise your hand if you're an 8th grader. Okay, so these will not be going on to next year. So give some advice on what to do. Preeti, I'm going to ask you to start.
Okay. For next year, I would probably say definitely focus on the theme because that's the main aspect of the project. So definitely focus on the theme and make that like centered around your city.
Yeah, so another thing that I really want for us to work on next year is just our teamwork, not to like get off topic all the time and be writing inside jokes and jokes through our essay, but actually staying on topic and trying to get our city done before the deadline.
Max?
I'm a first grade.
That's all right, you can go.
I was gonna,
Do differently so you don't drive me crazy.
so I would do differently next year is I would this year again we spent a lot of time doing fun stuff. What I noticed a lot of the things we need to work on is having more futuristic technologies. So we focused on a lot of like the building, and instead of thinking of new stuff, we use a lot of previous stuff, and then we incorporated that. So we really need to think outside of the box next year.
What I think we should do have a better plan. Like, so this year we didn't really have that much of a plan. So we were barely hitting the deadlines. So if we have a plan next year, then we probably will be able to hit the deadlines easier. And we faster.
I think we should start working a little faster and earlier because we're kind of cutting it close, and I think we didn't have enough time to make sure everything was set.
Yeah, I believe we could have been like a little bit more coordinated with our work between the essay and matching it with our city.
So I realized that we had a really big team this year. We had, I think it was like almost a full class, so like 20, 30 kids. So it's really hard to give everyone a part and still have it be equal. So we did pretty good on that, but there's still some things that we can improve on. So.
Okay. One last person.
And I'm not really sure what else to add because I think everybody else covered it pretty well.
Very diplomatic.
Thank you very much. Luana, last Straight over. Straight over. Watch out, everybody. Coming through.
I probably won't need a microphone. I got a pretty loud voice. My name is Mr. Clark. I'm the advisor for the Guana team. We had a team of approximately 9 to 10 students that worked on it throughout, always starting in September, all the way through the competition, which was at the middle part of January. As an advisor that's been working on this program for many years, I love an opportunity to see students get involved in STEM, which is the science, technology, engineering, and math programs. Especially like a lot of our team was actually girls, which is great opportunities to see girls get engaged in those areas. Part of our members, we have Scott, we have Jeremy, and we have Anderson. I think they learned a lot. One of the greatest things I like to see is kids that start out this year and have a difficult time with public speaking, and they step up to the plate to do presentations, sometimes for the first time talking in front of a group of people, and they do outstanding jobs. Best part is problem solving, and if you've ever gone through my class, it's how do you solve the problem? How do you solve the problem? And this is a great activity and a competition to teach kids how to work collectively as a team and to solve problems and pull out the best of a team and a group when they're working on the project. My group would like to very quickly talk about some of the designs that they did. And
I'll hold this, you talk.
Okay. So, okay. Our city is Cultura Paradiso. Our main goal is to focus on bringing people together and not tearing them apart. So in order to do that, we have our cultural center here. This is really the center of our city and the focal point. Here people can gather and meet and share their ideas. And we also have many different departments in this area. Dance, art, science, technology. Here we have, branching off of our cultural center, our carousel of culture. This is a rotating theater basically. So people sit in one of these sections over here, and the theater will rotate. So on a certain event, say a French holiday, in the theater we could have different portions of French dance, French art, French music, and the theater would rotate to show all these different things. We also have our power sources in our city. We have wind turbines, and we have an electrolysis plant. So this takes water from the ocean and converts it into hydrogen, oxygen, or sorry, I'm forgetting this here. We have heat, water, and electricity that will then get stored in tanks to be used for later purposes. And everything we make in our city is usable. So we use the heat, for example, in our domes. So here are our recreational centers. We have our domes. This is a snow dome, tropical dome, and an aquarium. And we have our sports center over here. We're an island in the Mediterranean Sea, is our city's location, so we do not get very much climate variations. So we would like to bring the climate to us so that people don't have to travel as much. So we have our snow dome here, where people can ski and ice skate, and we have our tropical dome over here. This is so people can experience what a jungle environment is like in the Mediterranean, because you're not going to really find one. And we also have our aquarium. And over there in the hub. So over there, we have, over here, oopsies. We have a residential sector, which has little greenhouse gardens on top, so each person can like plot their own, each person has their own plot, so they can grow whatever they want, whatever they need and stuff. We have this little transportation thing, the gyrosphere thing, so these tubes, pretty much are just gyrosphere tubes. So you'll get an app on your phone, and then you'll tell the you'll like input coordinates or location, and the gyrosphere will come through the tube, pick you up, and take you to wherever you want to go.
And here we have our sports complex, which you could play different sports like different sports all over the world, like sports in my country. There's a stuff called feather ball, where it's like tennis, but you hit it over the net. And we have basketball, volleyball, lacrosse, and football, and soccer. And on the top of it, we have a restaurant, which you can see all across down, because there's a glass floor down here, so you can see all the games down in the sports complex. And there's a solar panel on the top of it, so you can get light around these stars.
Around the city, right near the residential sector and the gyrosphere garage, we have little rotating solar arrays which will soak up the most sunlight, whatever way the sun is producing the most sunlight.
So what was the award?
We had the most innovative moving park. Not really sure which one, because we had like 5 or 6. We had like 5 or 6. So.
Probably the carousel culture.
Yeah, probably.
Good job, guys.
Okay, next item is our mid-year update CAC presentation. Question? Hold on.
I didn't know he was going to make a comment, so.
What, on
Cameron would like to make a comment. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I just know for being a part of some of these same clubs and activities, we really appreciate what these teachers do. I know when I was in 7th and 8th grade, I got to participate in Mr. Clark's Rocket Club. I do recall the rocket exploding in midair, but I really appreciate on a personal level for what these teachers do and instilling STEM in our in me in particular and in our students.
That's nice, Cam. That's good stuff.
Thank you, everybody, for having me. I'm Paul Rubchik. I'm the associate principal at the high school and also administrator with high school counselors. I think that's the second year in a row now I've had to follow that group, and what a wonderful group of young ladies and gentlemen and the hard work that they do. I've been asked by the Counseling Advisory Committee to give our mid-year report. I wanted to thank the Board of Education for your flexibility in allowing us to bump our date a couple of Tuesdays. It seems like every Tuesday we try to run our mid-year meeting, we had weather. So again tonight, we had weather, but we're here. So again, I want to thank you guys for allowing us to move the date. First slide, I just wanted to point out, as part of the Counseling Advisory documents, that we continue to monitor and focus on our charge of the committee, which is to address key paradigm shifts that pertain to quality control. That's doing the right things for our students, our quality assurance. We want to ensure that what's being done meets the needs of our customers and, again, our students and parents, and then our strategic positioning as we look to the future. So I just wanted to point that out as a focus for tonight's presentation. We again decided to use the same format that we did last year as it related to the presentation. We looked at some of the things we've done in the past, some of the things that we're currently doing in the present, and some of the things that we're looking to do in the future. Based on our meeting last week, everything that I'm presenting to you is coming as a result of communications back to me and or recommendations from the committee. I just wanted to go over some of the things that we did last year, and if there's questions related to those, I'll be happy to answer them. Last year, one of the things that we looked to adjust as part of evaluation of the college application process was changing our financial aid night, in particular to be able to accommodate the FAFSA form now being opened up in early summer. So we held an event in June this year to be available for parents and students. The intent as well is to provide that as part of a video. If parents, as they move forward with the process and students going into the fall season, they can reference that material. We did find that first run through the attendance was okay. We're going to have to look at that in the future and see how that plays out and get some input from parents and students as it relates to that evening. We continue to gather information from our students, our parents, and in particular this year and this fall, our teachers as it relates to our counseling department. This fall, as part of a large survey that the high school did, which included other areas, we did ask some questions related to the counseling department. Those topics were in particular attentive to what are the teachers seeing from our kids? What are the areas of need that we think that those students are pointing out to you as part of your everyday classroom setting? We recently shared out that information with the Counseling Advisory Committee, and in fact tomorrow at a department or a principals meeting, they're going to share out the total data as it relates to that. We're continuing as well to get feedback from our students. We're doing the high school partnership team did the exit survey again, and we got permission from the high school partnership team to allow the Counseling Advisory Committee to be able to see the data from that. So they're in the process of review of that data, and we'll get some feedback. I'm going to probably ask for feedback prior to our end of the year meeting so that we can kind of create some summaries from that. The Career Center is still up and running, something we started last year, both at High School East and now at High School West. If you went over to High School West this year, you will see that we did a makeover of that office itself. The idea behind the makeovers is to create a welcoming atmosphere for students. There's quotes on the wall, there's new tables where the kids can go in and sit, and there's a monitor for information updates for the students. But we wanted to continue with that Career Center concept. As part of the Career Center over at the high school, last year we started and we'll continue to do college essay writing clinic that we make available for seniors, that we have our English department and some of the administrators that volunteer their time to meet with seniors to help them out with their essays. We're continuing to do a student peer tutoring model, which has been very successful, where we have volunteers from a variety of different organizations, National Honor Society, for example, students who want to volunteer their time to work with students academically. And through the Career Center, we partner those students up. We actually make a one-on-one meeting with those kids so the students who need the assistance aren't having to go out and try to find that. So that's been really successful. We've set up places either in the academic resource center or the counseling center where the kids can come in and get extra help. One of the things that we will continue to do is monitor how we make available scholarships to our students, in particular, communicating out those scholarships through newsletters, through the use of our Naviance software, through portal blasts. But one of the new things that I'm working with one of the assistants with is trying to find students and point them in the direction of those scholarships. So, for example, we were finding in some cases that not a lot of students through self-application were finding all the scholarships that were out there. So we're taking the opportunity this year to add to this, to look at some of those scholarships and try to align them to some of the students that would qualify for them and get out to those students and say, hey, listen, the scholarship's available, you should apply for it.
Oh, can I just ask a
Sure.
question on that? Is that scholarships within the awards part of high school, or is this outside?
It's all,
Okay.
everything. It's all avenues. We're continuing to have our alumni network intern program and working with the Educational Foundation to see where we play a role in that. I have 6 interns again this year, two new sophomores. Some of the things that they're working on is a new Facebook page. They're developing a newsletter of sorts where they're going to be able to send out a communication related to past, present, and future. They're kind of getting excited about that. Information we can get out to our alumni as it relates to what happened in the past, what's going on now, and what we look forward to in the future. We'll continue to work with the Educational Foundation and play a role as much as we can with them. The counselors this year continue to be liaisons to each of the academic departments, making themselves available to answer questions and or provide information as it disseminates out of our office. They continue to communicate back to me as their advisor or as their administrator as to what's going on, and we try to help them out as much as we can and be available. As part of the past, I talked about this in September when I presented, that we did submit our ramp application and made the October deadline, and when I last came in December, we were waiting on a result, which I'll report out here in a minute. So those are the things that we did in the past. We look to the present. These are things that we're working on this year as a group. In particular, we wanted to continue to focus our efforts on the Naviance software and making sure that we're maintaining close working efforts with that organization. I had Dobson send me a couple of slides, so if I could go to those slides now. So these were sent by Dobson. So Naviance, again, can we go back, is our comprehensive K-12 college and career readiness solution software that helps the district and schools align the students' strengths and interest to post-secondary goals. We're really spending much more time on that curriculum component of the software. At first, we purchased the software to help with the electronic college application process, but it's becoming much, much more. So these are the things that we currently are purchasing or we have access to. They call it AchieveWorks. This is their curriculums. So at the high school, we do what you are personality profiler. we do a career interest profiler, and we're currently using a resume writer, and that's at both the middle school and the high schools. We are utilizing the eDocs, which is electronic documentation for college application process. At my last look, we had 30,000, wait, apologize. It was either 30,000, help me with this. I have some counselors in the back. 30,000 applications? That was a large number. 3,000. Maybe it's 3,000. All right. I knew it was 3. I apologize for not having the specifics, but our numbers, as we pointed out in the ramp application, of total number of applications that the students are put in has grown. Even though our population of students has grown, the average number has grown. I was looking today at the top 20 students, and out of that group, they averaged about 12 applications per kid. One student had applied to 21 colleges. So, you know, we'll continue to work with Dobson on this. Go back one, please. We're utilizing the test prep component for ACT. We're using the alumni tracker. That's a new item that at some point I want to share out more of that information with the board. That's connected to the National Student Clearinghouse. That's tracking of our post-grad students and what they're doing in relationship to secondary post-grad education. I'm still trying to get from Dobson comparisons to other school districts, but they'll tell us we're doing great. I want to be able to know what that means, so we're working on that piece. We're continuing to look at their curriculum, and then in particular, the middle school is using a career key, which is another curriculum resource. Dobson wanted to point out what we've done. This is kind of their tracking of our use of their materials. We have a monitoring report out of the annual usage. We set up goals to try to increase the number of hits that the kids are using on the Naviance software. They worked with our IMS data team to set up a school sync so that we could sync in the use of the Naviance to our IMS system. We're staying informed on the latest technology. We have regular call-ins. We have meetings. Mrs. Carmen and I recently went to Syracuse for a conference as it related to the software. They call it cluster align and assign tasks and success planning programs. That's their curriculum that they continue to present out to show us how it aligns from grade level to grade level. Reviewing necessary data requirements to retrieve data from the National Student Clearinghouse. That's what I was talking to you earlier about. Workshops they provide for us, for the employees, on managing the scholarships. I had a secretary sit in on that last year. Obtain Naviance training session, best practices, eDocs, and then the last piece, which I think is important, ensuring that the student-facing portal, which is what it is that the students and parents see, reflects what it is that we wanted to see based on what our parents and students are telling us. So they're working with us to develop a platform that as best they can, make it user-friendly for our students. One of the things I wanted to point out this year that and we were able to give feedback on is they made a change over the summer as it related to the teacher reference and process for students. And they tweaked it over the summer, and they tried to roll it out right at the beginning of the school year. Well, as you know, that's the craziest time for college application process. So it kind of threw a real kink into things, and we worked around it, and we made it very clear to Hobson that they needed to correct that. So that was something that, as part of our working with them, we were able to fix. All right. Counselor development. These are our goals that are aligned with district and building goals. One of the goals this year was to create a progression chart for the counseling department. We were able to do that and submit that prior to November of this year. Actually got it in, I think, at the end of September. One of the new things that we did as well this year is we created another opportunity for our sophomores coming in to meet their counselors in a small group setting prior to December of the school year. Traditionally, the sophomores, unless they came in to meet with the counselors, wouldn't have that face-to-face time, as you would call it, until academic planning in January, February. So this is a new thing that we tried. The counselors did a small activity with the students. Every sophomore had the opportunity to come in and meet with the counselors. And moving forward, we'll take a look at that program and adjust, react, and move forward with it. The student academic improvement recognition, this is another new thing that we did this year. Based on having a conversation with the group, we wanted to try to develop a program where we recognize students that maybe weren't necessarily those honor students, the 85 or above. So we wanted to be able to show how important it was for those students to be able to show growth. So after the first quarter, the counselors developed a program where they each recognized at the high school, and we did this at the high school to pilot this year, 3 students for a total of 27 students was the first quarter, looked at how they did, and had them come down, recognize them for their improvements. They were given a certificate. They were given a letter went home to the parents, and they were also given, I think, a Stewart's ice cream, right? A Stewart's ice cream certificate. So I know we saw a lot of happy, smiling faces. Again, these are students that wouldn't necessarily get the recognition, but they deserved it. And moving forward, we're going to do this at the end of the next 2 quarters with the idea of trying to recognize 27 new students. Collaboration with the Wellness Center. As you know, the Wellness Center opened this year. We're continuing to work with them and get feedback from that group to see how it's going and how we might be able to assist that group in whatever way. I think it's an ongoing project as we continue to get through the school year. We'll get feedback at the end and we'll adjust accordingly. The career interest. The interns in the Career Center are going to be doing a local business share in March. We had talked about the opportunities for local business people, and in particular entrepreneurs, that may be able to come in and share their stories with some of our students. And the interns have decided they're going to reach out, and they just recently sent out communications to 25 local business people to have them come in and meet with students in lunch periods during the month of March. All right, the book talk. Back in the end of last year, the Counseling Advisory Committee, after discussion with the counselors, decided they were going to do a book talk. The book, entitled The Gift of Failure by author Jessica Leahy, was read by the group over the summer, and we came back in September to have discussions about it. Jessica's book is written for parents in particular, but it really is written for all groups. It's written for parents, it's written for students, it's written for educators. Her theme is more about building that intrinsic motivation in students and building autonomy in students. And this kind of came about as a result of some of the things we were seeing at the high school as it related to students expressing to us that they were having anxieties about a variety of different things, whether it was simple tasks that they were not accomplishing and how do we get by that, to just the overall amount of materials that they were having to try to handle over the course of a high school career. So as a result, we gave this book a read, and moving forward, I'll talk about what we've decided we'd like to recommend as part of that book read. The alumni interns, as I said, are continuing to work with the Educational Foundation, and then the ramp report out. At this time, I'm going to hand out to the board members. This is a letter I received in January from the American School Counselors Association, and while they read that, I'll talk a little bit about this. So the ramp application, the American School Counselors Association provides the opportunity for counseling programs to do this ramp application. For us, it was an opportunity to look at our program and how we could best impact students. It's a 12-component application. There's a lot of writing. There's a lot of data gathering. There's a lot of thinking about your program. There's mission statements, there's vision statements. And back in October when we submitted it, we knew that in January we were going to find out whether or not we were going to be a recognized school. The board members at this time are reading a letter congratulating the school on receiving our ramp recognition for the 2016-17 school year. We're one of only 2 schools in the whole state of New York that now have this recognition. As part of this recognition, I'm going to take it upon myself to go out to Denver for the National Convention in July and accept on behalf of the Shenendehowa School District the award for ramp. So tonight I have several of my counselors here, and I wanted to recognize them for their efforts along with Mr. Flint, the principal. So I've got Mike Carpentieri. Mike, step up. There he is, Mike. Megan Gifford, Lauren DiGianni, and one of Mike's interns, Jennifer Hobbs, is here. And she's raising her hand, although she wasn't here last year. We talked about the importance of allowing us to have those interns, because as much work as this is, the counselors still have to continue to do their thing with kids. And this was a lot of extra time and effort that we had to supplement someplace else. And last year we had 3 wonderful interns that were allowing us to do that. And I just wanted to make a point that and she knows she's got work moving forward, because there's still things that we want to be able to do as part of this. The ramp application is a 5-year application. At that time, the expectation is if you want to continue with that recognition that you resubmit. For us, it's more than that. It's really about continuing to do the good things that we're doing and monitoring and listening and we know the model now. How do we move forward? How do we continue to do what's best for our students? So real proud of that. Actually, there's one more thing that I shared with you, but I didn't share with the board yet. I got another email yesterday from Jill Cook, who is the Assistant Director of the American School Counselors Association. It reads, "Congratulations, Shenendehowa, again on your school ramps designation. Based on your school score, Shenendehowa High School will be recognized as a ramp school of distinction at the 2017 ASCA conference. Shenendehowa is one of only 6 ramp schools of distinction this year. I will provide," and she's going to give me an update. So out of over 600 schools in the country, based on our reporting out of our document, will be recognized as a school of distinction at this national conference. So congratulations to you guys on that. For the future, just quick, 2 things based on recommendations from the committee. One of the things that we talked about doing is reviewing the current ASCA model, and in particular, our district comprehensive plan, and also the Board of Education Counseling Advisory document. We're going to have a subcommittee that's going to get together and kind of take a look at all 3 of those documents and see where they, I don't know if the terms measure up, but where there's similarities and where there's some things that just aren't. And I think the idea behind this is to try to see if we can build it into one thing that we're looking at versus a variety of different things. The committee's expectation is to report back, and we'll give a result out at the end of the year as it relates to that. The last thing is the collaboration of the school district, the PTSA, and the Clifton Park Public Library to bring Jessica Leahy, the author of The Gift of Failure, to Shenendehowa as a guest speaker next school year. We're still in the process of playing this out and seeing if this can be something that can happen. I think what excited the committee about this opportunity is for us as a community to work around our children and how we might be able to present a message based on her presentation to the community and really kind of build off of that moving forward. So that's where we're at. Questions? Yes.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
On one of your slides, you mentioned student and teacher surveys. Can you speak about parent surveys?
Parent survey was done a little over a year ago. All right.
Thought you would want to have that work also recognized
What do you mean the work rate?
for this group? Because you're, the third slide, student and teacher surveys conducted and results shared. I wouldn't want people to think that there wasn't also.
Okay. So Ms. Blaber's question is, how about the parents? Were they allowed the opportunity to provide information? A little over a year ago, we did do a survey for the parents and provided the feedback to the Counseling Advisory Committee and the counselors, as well as we did a focus group with some parents and utilize that information. We continue to offer the opportunity for people for parents and students, teachers to provide us information. I'm answering grapevine questions all the time. We have little surveys in our office that people can come in and fill out. I'm open, my email's open to anybody that has questions or concerns. But I think over the course of time, we have to continue to gather information. What means we use, we can look at. But surveys, for us, have been something that we've been using over the last several years.
And then my other question was, one of these Naviance slides, which I think is in our language, but okay, says ensure student-facing portal family connection reflects the desired goals of district leadership.
That was adjusted. That slide was, when I met with the company to have them explain that, and I apologize for not getting the edit to you ahead of time. But
so how, you in your presentation talked about how that's something that they've set up for you. My question is, how do you identify what those needs are so that Naviance works the way our students and parents need it to work?
We listen to the students, we listen to the parents. Again, feedback, based on how things go from year to year, utilizing the software, we get together and discuss, adjust, and
so you get that feedback. It's a loop.
It is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yes. One thing we thought would be appropriate as we prepared this meeting was to recognize you for what you did with the RAMP certification. So
Can I have my counselors come up too? Because this is more than, guys,
Bring them
can you
up.
come up? Thank you.
So as you come up, I'll read this. On behalf of the Shenendehowa Central School District and the Board of Education, the Certificate of Achievement is presented to Mr. Paul Ripchick and the High School Counseling Center. In honor of your work being named as the American School Counselor Association as a recognized ASCA Model RAMP school. The designation awarded for aligning with the criteria in the national model recognizes schools that are committed to delivering a comprehensive, data-driven school counseling program in an exemplary educational environment. So we'd like to recognize Mr. Ripchick.
Thank you very much.
And
appreciate
the
it.
counseling team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And please
Thank
put
you.
this in a place where you can be recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, next time.
Yep.
Okay, next up is mid-year projection and three-year financial forecast.
So as Mrs. Wetmore comes forward, each year prior to, as a part of the budget development process, we do a couple different exercises. And one of the things I want to be very clear about that this isn't the budget. So again, the percentage that you see here, you have seen this before, we try to get some sense of, okay, if we don't do a lot in terms of analysis and just simply kind of roll things forward based upon some known assumptions, what does the next few years look like? And that gives us a good sense of, okay, do we really need to focus on some maneuvering that may not necessarily be as positive, such as cost cutting? Do we need to be much more strategic in other areas? So this just gives us a flavor in terms of some of the approaches that we'll take with the actual budget development itself. So you'll see two things tonight, and it's a lot of data, so we won't necessarily walk you through each of the data points, but more so focus on some of the bottom lines. You'll see what we think that if everything continued the same way for current year, what we project the end of the year should look like. And a couple bottom lines just want to, Mrs. Wetmore will point out when we get there, is what do we anticipate our expenditure bottom line should look like? what do we anticipate our revenue bottom line should look like, and then that would then drive some conversation about fund balance. Recognize that we're sitting here in February, and we're making assumptions about what would transpire at the end of June, beginning of July, and even the fund balance conversation, the conversation that we have much more intense or in-depthly with the board in August in terms of reserve. So this is not meant to be that. It's just, again, a kind of a forecast out. So as we go into the budget process, we can have some sense, are we going to end this year in a good place? Or we end up in a place that, whoa, because this year is going to be extremely tight, we have to reconsider about how we build 17, 18 budget and beyond. And then the 3-year forecast is just truly just that. It's a forecast. There are many, many factors that comes into play all the time with the budget process. But it gives the board a sense of, okay, are we heading in a good direction, or are we heading into a turbulent direction? And I think you're going to see tonight that we head in a fairly positive direction because of all the work that we have done in the past.
So I literally go line by line in the budget and project out where I think we're going to be for the end of the year. And because we're now on WinCap, we have a lot more tools, not only to project, but to build our budgets going forward. So the first page shows salaries, which is about 70% of our budget. We know that we have a lot of, in fact, we have 70 leaves of absence and about 60 terminations, which would include things like retirements, resignations, or other. We do have some savings here, 1.6 million, 27, and 567,000.
So just a point, and that's a important point for the board. When you think we have about 1,600 full-time equivalent, we actually have about 2,200 bodies that work for the school district, but we put them in a full-time equivalent, it's about 1,600 people. And that turnover of about 150, 160 so people create different variations in the budget. And I say because some cases we're hiring someone higher at where someone left at, we hire someone lower than where someone left at, and all those plus and minuses is what you see in the differences in some of these things. And so sometimes someone's sitting and say, whoa, how can that be? Well, if we have a fully veteran staff in the beginning of the year and 20 of those people retire 3 months into the year, and we hired 3 novice employees coming in, the cost differential is there. We can't predict that now in February, what's going to be happening in February of the following year. So I just want to know that that's that variation of staff, and that's not an unusual pattern, particularly with leaves and things of that nature in our business cycle.
And then moving on, the various line items that we have represent the other probably 20% in the budget. Contractually, we're expecting to have a little bit more left over because of savings in utility and insurance. If you recall, last year we did an RFP at the end of the year for our general liability insurance, and lo and behold, this year we have about $115,000 in savings. So just goes to show doing RFPs every so often actually does pay off. Sure.
Health insurance part of that contract? No, it'll be on the benefits fees. So just a couple of things that what this projection also helps us too. So for instance, when we start looking at certain things at the end of the year, and we start saying, okay, what are certain things that we know we can use next year that we potentially purchase this year to create flexibility the next year. So it becomes a cycle moving forward all the time, and so we kind of always try to be, how do we create flexibility without having to tax our way to flexibility? Does that make some sense within the sequence of it? So this exercise kind of serves a couple of different purposes as well as give us some indication in just one area here. For instance, textbook and library, there's a state reimbursement that comes specifically with that, and so it gives us some sense of, are we on target to maximize the state reimbursement or not? And so we can't wait till end of June to realize, oh, we're not going to maximize, because at that point it's too late to make purchases, relevant purchases, to maximize those kind of things. So this gives us that feel as well to say, how do we make sure we maximize particularly those categories where there's a state reimbursement that align with certain expenditures? Does that make sense to the board? This is the benefits one, Mr. Casey, we're talking about here.
right? And that's always the one that is a direct result of what our salaries are, because some of what we pay is a percentage of salaries, like retirement system and Social Security. We do have some savings, obviously, in ERS, TRS, Social Security, and health insurance. But we are targeting health insurance a little more closely with all of the tools that we have.
So, bottom line, Karen?
Yeah, bottom line, we're projecting to have about $6.2 million in savings.
So before you get to that though, if you see this 96%, last year we ended right around 97 point something. And so we're on target to be at about that same place in terms of expending about 97%, 98% of our budget. Rich, when you think about that, it's pretty efficient process. And so one of the things we watch that to say, are we consistent from year to year? You as a board get probably every month, every other month, the treasurer's report that gives you the bar graph to see expenditure pattern 1 year comparison to the next. And so this kind of gives you a whole year glimpse of, okay, if we keep going this year, are we going to be similar to past years? And this becomes important for us to watch this piece of it, because again, it drives to see what decisions are we making this year that can have a positive or a negative impact on the coming year's budget development process. And we use all this data to build the next year budget process. So we're not necessarily building just based upon what we budgeted. We're building based upon what we know actual costs to be and some of those other factors building forward.
Right. It's actually our starting point. And then moving on to the revenue items, we actually realized about 100%, just a little over 100% of our revenue. So we do have some pluses and minuses that offset each other. Property taxes tend to be adjustments that are after we issue our tax bills. Everything else is pretty close, plus or minus.
Any questions on these two pieces?
So, for federal revenue, do you see coming down the road, or we just don't know yet?
So this is actually more from Medicaid reimbursement, and this is one of those revenue sources. To be quite frank with you, we have kind of, I don't want to say we've given up on trying to get ahead of, because they were so backlogged for so many years with Medicaid reimbursement pieces, and just to give you some sense, this number has reduced significantly over the years, just because they've changed what's reimbursable, they've changed the amount of reimbursement, and so we have no idea where this is going. The other piece of federal revenue that we spoke about more so our federal grants, our Title I, Title II grants, that's a whole different conversation as well.
Now, did Medicare start clearing a little bit of the backlog? Because I thought I saw like we're at 189% of that on the, was it the treasurer's report this month? You would know better than me.
Right, yeah. No, they are starting to catch up. Some of it's a little bit of a timing difference from prior year too. So again, it's very difficult to estimate based on timing. In the end, we're seeing about $42,000 more than what we budgeted, which is always a good thing. And then moving forward to what our fund balance would look like, we're starting with what we ended with at the end of last year at $6.4 million. We took what our estimated revenue and expenses were. The difference between those is our operational excess of $6.3 million. Added to the beginning is $12.7 million. That gives us some leeway as to funding some of our reserves, the reappropriation for next year's budget, which we tend to do every year fairly consistently, assuming it's 1.5 again.
So these are the conversations that we have July, August, after we go through the actual year-end audit process and have some good sense of what we actually have. And then we make those, so that's why all these question marks are there. These are questions to be answered in the future. And just want to point out, this is one of those, this is a reserve that the voters approved last May to establish a capital reserve. And one of those areas that we think we'll be recommending is to fund that reserve, because we approved that reserve for the purpose of planning, aligning with our capital project plan and future votes on facilities. So it makes sense to try to fund it, because this is used to what we call to stabilize the tax impact when the projects come on board. So that's one of those areas that we'll be looking to recommend to the board as one of those kind of things, as well as the ERS liability. That's for the retirement system, because we're watching those costs. Those are just And if those costs don't go up as much, obviously we won't reserve as much to try to offset those costs. So in other words, so we're not cutting academic programs to pay for increased liability expenditures. So that's the kind of backstory, if you will, behind some of those reserves. Any questions on these particular things?
And you don't need to do it tonight, just the question I have. So between this slide and the previous slide, there are reserve account. Can you provide us with what
Balances?
we have in reserve,
Yeah,
the balance of those reserve accounts
we
we've
will.
got now?
Yeah, and so just a point of Mr. Casey's piece, all these reserves that we have, they're not just arbitrary numbers that we come up with. We have to justify that these are either potential or bona fide existing expenditures. So for instance, tax certiorari, we have tons and tons of tax certiorari claims. And so we go through this process and we have to based upon what we have, come to some estimation that, quite frankly, that our auditors would say is acceptable as a reserve. So it's not arbitrary at all. These are things that potentially come to a head, and if they do come to a head, we don't want to find ourselves making cuts in programs because we're paying for a court proceeding that came about, as an example of those things. So, but we'll do that once we get to this point in August. This piece I just want to point out is here where the state allows 4%, and we're projecting to be slightly under that 4% fund balance carryover piece.
I had a question relative to, from year to year, are we making some progress towards 4%, or is it?
We've been fairly stable. So Mr. Dowell, you've been on the board long enough to appreciate the days when it used to be 2%.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were that half one, and so over the years, and especially when the state started allowing the increase the threshold of 4, we've been trying to move towards that and stay that. So I would say, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we can certainly provide that. But I would say for the past 3 years, we've been around that 3.5 mark, which is pretty stable. Right. And that comes into effect to when we get our bond rating. And our bond rating has been pretty high, pretty solid. In other words, we could borrow money cheaper because it's like, to you and I, it's our credit score. To our school district, it's our bond rating. And that bond rating is pretty solid because we keep a stable reserve allocation and fund balance allocation. That's one of the big things that they look at. Are you stable from year to year? And I would say we've been relatively stable over the past several years within the state limit. And even if you look here, we project out even another year back out to 18, 19, we're still looking at that same kind of stable projection. So that's why we go through this whole gyration to say, if we keep doing this, do we continue to stay physically sound as an organization or not, or do we anticipate some blips out, which kind of goes to the second part. Kathy, you just want to go down to this piece here to talk about just the bottom line, how these three projections play out.
Yeah, so the first column is exactly what our mid-year projection is, so that number is recurring. Making some assumptions about increases going forward, contractual or trends. We're 1.25% over our actual from last year, 3.12% over actual for 16-17, that's for 17-18. And then the next 2 years is actually budget to budget increase, 4.52 and 4.32%. So that's assuming that we're continuing to operate as we have been.
And so from a board perspective, this piece of information is important. If we were sitting here saying that these were 14%, you should be really, really concerned. We're sitting here saying that they're 4%, and we know that once we get into the budget process and the tax cap, quite frankly, constrain our expenditure limits, we know that this is a doable range moving forward to be within those for the things that we know now. And the big part of it is what we know now. And a big unknown for us every year is the state aid factor in the equation, and then other ancillary costs such as where's health insurance going. So if we see a 15-20% rise in health insurance costs, huge piece that impacts us. If we see a huge downturn in the market in terms of investment market, that has a huge impact on retirement increases, because most of the reserves, most of the dollars in both ERS, Employee Retirement System, and TRS, Teacher Retirement System, is contingent upon the market. So we watch the market and the market typically has a 3-year lag. So if we have a bad market, when we had a bad market piece, that impact us 2 years later significantly because you saw the rate increase go up because you're not getting enough investment income coming into those reserve systems. So again, I don't want to give the impression that this takes into consideration all of those significant variables. We're saying that if everything we know now were to kind of continue for the most part, we'll be here and we'll massage the process to be within the tax cap limit. I mean, does that make sense from the board? And this is good for us because it gives us a good baseline to start the budget development process that we get much more intense with in terms of analyzing program needs and doing all the what-if scenarios that we do as a part of presenting to you and ultimately to the public what we think would be a passable budget.
There was one clarification. You mentioned the impact of the status of the stock market. It's a 3-year rolling average, right? So that if you had a bad year and 2 good years, well, it doesn't look quite so bad unless you have another year of bad and so forth.
But actually, the TRS, they technically kind of do a 5 to try to socialize the impact as much as we can.
Right.
And especially, again, when you had the market crash a few years back, that devastated a lot of places in terms of, I mean, even personal investments. And so that's the one that we have to watch. And right now, the market is very tentative, and people are watching that to see where the market is going to go over the next 18 months. And that's where the people sometimes don't think about the impact. That's where something happened on Wall Street or on the Tokyo Index or whatever. Those things come back and haunt us a few years down the road, and people say, well, the market is good right now. Why are we seeing these rate increases? Well, it's the lag effect of it. Thanks, Kat.
Next up, we have our policy and regulations review, first reading.
And I'll stand in for Mrs. Carmen in case there are questions that you have. I'll try to address. I'll bring back Mrs. Carmen is supposed to be back tomorrow, so we are pleased to have her back after some personal illness.
I have one question, just on the last policy, which is the constitutionally protected prayer in public schools. Is that a requirement that we have, is that a legal requirement that we have that policy? The only reason I ask the question is, there's another policy that deals with religious
Observances?
Yeah, and it appears to be included in there. I wasn't sure if this is one that...
So is the question then, say this way, there are a lot of policies, we have been trying to make it deliberate whenever it's feasible and doesn't change the law to merge some policies. And I can't say, Mr. Casey, if we actually looked at those two, but one of the things that we've been, as a policy review over the years, trying to, as much as we can, but we don't want policy to get lost.
Yeah.
Because it's better than something.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's a requirement that we have that in policy. The question is a standalone policy versus something else becomes a question.
I just asked a question on the policy.
Yep.
So I had questions you're going to revisit for later.
Yes, and so Mrs. Blaber had a couple questions on some of the forms, on 2 forms and 1 regulation, correct?
Right. My concern with the regulation is that there's cases at the bottom of the regulation that's to be rescinded, and do those move over? I understand that the regulation is going to be rescinded. Do those
The citations.
Right.
Okay,
are they no
got you.
longer necessary?
We'll look
or
at
do they
that.
move
Okay.
To the policy,
Got you.
which was where they really belong.
Yeah, so because we're rescinding one policy because we're doing something else, so the question is, do we need to also provide those same citations in the next policy?
Yes.
Okay. And so we'll look at that piece of it. And so back to Mrs. Blaber's, because her questions, the board approved the policy, not necessarily the regulations and the forms. And so what we'll do, we'll take those type questions and go back and see what's the most appropriate placement of the language. And even Mr. Casey's comment here, again, when we see opportunities to merge policies appropriately, we try to do so because it makes it easier for the end user and not thinking that we have 5 policies on this one thing. Which one should I read first? Should I read second? So we try to do that as much as we can. So we'll look back at those comments.
Anything else on policy? Okay, if not, let's move to consent items. First one is treasurer's report. Can I have a motion? Mr. Gilbert, Mr. Casey, any comments, questions on treasury report? All in favor? Okay. And I think the minutes, we can combine them. No one objects. Motion on combining the minutes. Mr. Casey, second Mrs. Stevenson. Any comments, questions? All in favor? Okay. And next item is for action items, approval of additional ECA clubs, non-cash clubs, and classroom accounts for 2016, 2017. Could I have a motion to bring this to the floor? Mrs. Blaber, second Mr. DeLallo. Any comments, questions? All in favor? And item 2, scholarship and local grant donations. Motion to bring this to the floor. Mrs. Stevenson, second Mr. Casey. Any comments, questions?
What is KULA? What is the KULA Foundation?
That's a good question.
Okay.
I
For
could-
another time. It
I'll get you
doesn't
back on
make
that
me
one.
want to stop accepting with gratitude.
Okay.
So
Global
Kathy, do you have a
Foundation.
follow-up on that?
Okay, all in favor? Okay. And next up is Mrs. Mylod with our acceptance of special education placements. Motion to bring this one. Mr. Casey, any second? Mr. DeLallo. Any comments or questions for Mrs. Mylod?
So I had Mrs. Mylod just put together a little sheet, because one, I thought it was interesting. Two, she put a lot of time in it. Hold on, is it?
There's 2 pieces.
Okay, 2 pieces of paper.
Mrs. Blaibauer had asked at the last meeting if I had noticed any trends in special education. So, interestingly, the bottom sheet is an article I received today through one of my websites, and it talks about the trend of the increase in autism classifications and also other health impairment, largely due to autism sometimes being classified as another health impairment due to the type of severity, and also the significant increase in mental health issues in schools. So I did prepare that for you. It shows our rate. You will notice that the total number of students is all of the students that come in during the school year. So the numbers might not match up to what you receive each month in your monthly enrollment report because students move in and move out. So that's our total numbers. So if you have any questions, happy to respond to those.
You're getting close to 1,000. Really, really close to 1,000.
Yes, close.
Okay.
Okay. Any?
Thanks, Michelle.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor? And next up is Mrs. Bush, approval of staffing recommendations. Motion to bring this to the floor. Mrs. Blaber, second Mrs. Stevenson. Questions for Mrs. Bush?
I have a question.
Yes.
The recommendation to provide a stipend to Rose Barra for robotics. And just to, I mean, it's a personnel item, but it's, recommendation is, as I recall, $4,500. And at the same time, we're approving stipends for coaches, head coaches that are, $6,700. Those kind of things. What's the equity there? What's the case?
The coaching is contractual, and the stipend for administrator for Rose in the position that she's doing, it's not a coaching position, was determined with a number of factors. But
I was raising a question about the amount of time and the amount of commitment she makes to that program. It seems to be substantial.
So, and again, not that we will make a recommendation tonight, but maybe something, sound like the board is open to looking at those stipend and being more favorable to what we're paying now. And I know also we have another person getting a stipend for robotics too, correct?
yes, he's a teacher, and that's, I believe it's Christopher Mars. Yes.
So what we can do, it's a fair question, and we don't have a lot of non-contractual stipend. Most of what we pay people is because of contract. And so what we'll do is go back and look at non-contractual stipends and see what those are, and then provide the board with some feedback on that piece of it. We could do that.
Number of students and...
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, and
Yes.
other things that's impacted, so we can look at that.
And Mrs. Bears is more than robotics, it's also coordination of the STEM,
Yep.
STEM,
Right.
so. Okay,
So we'll
thank
do some analysis on the non-contractual stipends and get back to you.
We have one retirement, Scott McNamee, who has been a building custodian after 36 years. He is currently on leave, but he is retiring, so we wish him well. Thank you.
Good. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Okay. And next item, curriculum and instruction, approval of textbooks and new course for English 12. That was presented 2 weeks ago. Motion to Mr. Gilbert, second. Mr. DeLallo, any comments or questions? All in favor? Okay, now on to 7E, Veterans Exemption. Motion to bring this one to the floor. Mrs. Blaber, second. Mr. Casey. So let's open up to comments and questions. So,
Comment?
okay, comment, Mr. DeLallo?
Sure. This is one which is not easy. 4 uncles that served in the Second World War, 2 cousins killed in Vietnam, the personal desire to have served in the military, but because of my years, I was not able to. I have a great sympathy and gratitude to people who served. At the same time, I was having trouble with the idea of asking people who are not veterans to accept a greater tax burden in order to provide the exemption. Up until this evening, when Mr. Friedman spoke, I was still leaning towards, no, I can't do this, even though I'd like to. But he brought home something that really I found compelling. And that was the idea that beyond everything else that they did, that there was actually a continuing, ongoing economic loss, and that there is an ability here for us to do something about that, to socialize that cost to a certain degree. So when it comes to voting for this, I'm surprising myself, but I'm going to vote in favor of the exemption.
I just wanted to clarify a comment I made earlier, because I didn't want it to come across the wrong way. When I spoke to you personally about, you could do this, I just want to be clear with everybody. You and I may not always agree on things up here at the board table, but I have absolutely no question about your ethics. And I don't want any, I'm trying to think back to what I said, I don't want anybody confused what I said. You make your own decision, but I know you as the most ethical veteran person who served this country in a leadership role, and I just want to make sure no one leaves here with any kind of impression that I have any question about your ethics on this. I think it's honorable, very honorable to have ethics as you described this. You have been consistent, even as this was up, we started some rumbling last year. You were very clear. You did not want to benefit from this and didn't feel it was right sitting here. And I greatly respect that. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that.
So I thought about this as well, and, you know, at the crux of this is the dysfunctional state government that we have that, you know, makes decisions and then puts it on everybody else to do it because they don't want to either, you know, upset certain voters or, you know, they're unwilling to make a decision. And I don't see any value to us in kicking this can down the road. I personally have a lot of respect and family that have been in the military, and we have an opportunity, in my opinion, to do the right thing, to do something that the state government can't or won't do because of their dysfunctionalness, and I've said that a couple times. So I really do see the value here, and I would support moving in at the basic A exemption.
Mrs. Blaber?
Just an observation and a question. In the materials that we were provided as background, we saw that the level K exemption would result in a very, not holding anybody to this, estimate of like $62 a year increase to the rest of the taxpayers, veteran and non-veteran. But what is being suggested here is level A, which I don't know the math, but I'm assuming it would be considerably less of an impact. Would that be a fair
It would be less, but it's not just a proportional relationship.
Understood.
Okay.
And because there are so many
Yeah,
other
exactly,
variables,
exactly.
but
The
it
person
wouldn't
has
be,
their value.
it wouldn't be $62.
That's correct. It would be
Most
something
likely.
less than that.
Right, 62 minus X. So I think it's important to clarify that. If we went forward with an exemption at any level, and later on, as Mr. Presley suggests, V-Star comes to pass, what do we have to do? Can we undo this action? Do we need to undo an exemption? What would be the impact of state V-Star if we already have exemption?
I mean,
Is that detrimental?
That's a I don't know question, because if another law is passed to rescind existing law, there has to be some consideration to how places have already enacted the original law. So I really couldn't even start to provide you a decent answer to that question, because I don't know what a V-Star would do if it would say it's going to supersede whatever schools have, and it just become available to every veteran, and therefore there's no local action necessary, and takes it out of the hands of schools. I couldn't tell you.
But you don't think it would be something that would be damaging or potentially damaging?
You know, I
can't even characterize that.
I can't even characterize that.
Okay.
I would love to, but I couldn't even.
Okay.
Yeah, couldn't even know where to start on that one.
The only thing is, for all its goofiness, government rarely takes away something. You know what I mean? And it seems to me, since, well, I don't know what it is, 226 districts that approved this or something, and many from the downstate area where the Assembly and Senate folks are located.
Plus municipalities that have
Yeah,
approved it.
it seems like it would be stupid on their part to do that. That doesn't always qualify what they do. But.
Any other comments? Ms. Stevenson?
Yeah, I always find these comments when we get to points like this interesting, because, we have an audience, but yet it's really our discussion. And I really grappled with this one, really, really did. My dad was a World War II vet. My uncles were, and, I tend to agree with Todd again. This is something that the state really should have picked up. This is not business for a Board of Education. Having said that, I wish we could have deliberated more. I made my comments very clear, and several issues I brought forward to the leadership of this board. I wish we could delineate different populations. Again, the most vulnerable being the World War II vets, Korea, Vietnam, but we can't do that. So having said that, and I really struggle with this, I gotta tell you. But I think I would go along, and I'm understanding it's the basic.
That's the resolution.
Some comments. After we had our public hearing, I then spoke about, transparency, integrity of the community, made the point that, our role is to share perspectives, okay? You come to these meetings and you sort of see this, you've read these things, and then, if you're talking to your peers who have different views of this, you tend to adjust and adapt. We also had a public hearing where, we invited members of the community to be part of the discussion for those 30 minutes, okay? So, based on what you said, Bill, and I think also what Mr. Friedman, you had a very compelling story that we hadn't heard before. And we're on the topic of your story. I think it would be very important as we look for other venues to present and discuss a veteran's experience to our students. We'd like to perhaps talk to you and see if you'd be willing to present the same compelling story you had up here. Okay. I think it'd be good to present, Mr. Atwell's story as well as some other of your peers, and just get in front of the students and say, this is what I lived through. Okay. I think it's very important that we do that with our veterans in our community so that they get an appreciation at the right time in the year, either Veterans Day or Memorial Day or something similar. So I've sort of backed off from, saying I will abstain. I think your suggestion was appropriate, so was yours, Mr. Friedman. So, in spirit of what we communicated on transparency and integrity, I think, I'm willing to be open to accepting the basic max.
So we have motion was by
I did the motion.
Mrs. Blaber and second by Mr. Casey.
So quick, let's vote.
that?
Quick,
Call the
let's
question.
vote. All
Call
in
the
favor?
question.
Okay, so I'd like to call the question, and that means
All in favor?
on Mrs. Blaber.
And my motion was to accept the recommendation of the exemption at level A.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor? Okay.
So just one comment, and I have to apologize to the board. We have this that the board's supposed to sign, but gotta take the watermark out of it. So I'm going to ask board members if tomorrow or some point, as soon as possible, we could stop by and see Vanessa just to sign the bottom of this, so we have this for our official record. And we'll start, Mrs. Wetmore will start the process of communicating with whomever we need to communicate, so that people are aware that this exemption was passed by the board. And so as soon as you can sign this, we'll just have this as our documentation as well.
All right, let's move on to second reading, policies and procedures. And I think that's back to you.
Yeah, any questions on the second reading policies?
I move to accept.
Can I have a motion? Mrs. Blaber, second, Mr. Gobert. Any comments, questions? Or, excuse me, all in favor?
Jump the gun.
Okay. And at this point, we would like to turn over to further public comments. Is there anybody who would like to make a public comment? Okay, and at this point, we're going to move towards adjournments. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Casey, second, Mr. Gilbert. All in favor? Okay. Before we tap the hammer, we're going to talk about some topics, district goals, character education, full-day kindergarten programs, an overview of homework and grading on our next meeting.
Homework and grading is going to be pushed back.
Okay,
I'll send something on Friday, both.
okay, meeting adjourned.